Hi, I'm Jason Buck from Mutiny Funds. We're here at a lovely private event for the collective in Nantucket. First time in this area of the world. I know you're a long time Nantucketite. You come every summer.
Merely a tourist, yes.
Here with my friend Matt Reustle, who's a media entrepreneur, international man of mystery, bon vivant. So many titles that we can talk about today. One of the conversations we were having this morning at the collective event that I thought was really interesting is we were talking about influencers or content creators and how that relates to business and how that's an evolving landscape and how people even kind of like bristle at the idea of influencer. But like there's a narrative inflection investing, and you bring up some really good examples. I brought like the old school ones people talked about before, like Buffett was the first content creator with his newsletter. Another one I thought of is Howard Marks, right? Great newsletter. So you could say content creator, influencer, they might bristle at that. I think maybe it's an age gap that people bristle at. But you have a really interesting take on it, given your background at Colossus and running your own podcast and your own media empires and how you think about it even across public equities. So tell me a little bit more about it.
Yes, well, I think as we learned this morning, the term influencer makes many people shudder, and it has this negative association, which even I feel personally. Anytime that someone throws out influencer, it makes me shudder, it makes me concerned. But when you step back and you think, well, what is the definition of an influencer? It's a person of influence. And the power that that entails, I think, is just being tapped into now, where you brought up great examples of Buffett leveraging shareholder letters as this form of content which has infinite power. Once it's out there in the market, people can find the disciple that they're going to become and follow in Buffett's footsteps. And that's evolved Ray Dalio with his letter. And what that's doing is bringing in an audience, forming trust with that audience, and then ultimately being able to potentially use that for business purposes in the future. That can come across as a negative thing, but I think when you step back, that's what all of business is it relates to some type of sale, some type of decision being made where dollars and cents exchange hands. And where we've seen it evolve recently is that traditional business people are starting to tap into what would be considered the influencer world. And I think the best example, which we talked about this morning, was Brad Jacobs, who has a long history of execution in business. He's built 4 or 5 different billion dollar businesses in different industries.
Only 4 or 5?
Yeah, it might honestly be 6.
And to clarify, a billion plus each.
Yes, and we're talking several of these businesses are well north of 10 billion. And I was someone who was a research analyst while at Goldman, studying Brad, trying to make a decision on the stock, trying to understand what makes this man tick. But one of the things that I learned is that he will use every resource possible to achieve his mission. And most recently, he has tapped into these new media outlets, such as podcasts and videos, and he's made the awareness of who Brad Jacobs is much wider. It's captured a much wider audience. What does that accomplish for him? Well, you see where his stock trades. He is also in the business of M&A, and having a stock at a higher valuation means that's a cost of capital equation where that can be advantageous to making accretive deals, to making more deals. So I think this is just like something that we're in the early innings of. There are still many people who dismiss the idea of what's going on in new media as kind of for the retail world. But I think you're seeing it move into the business world, and people just have to get comfortable with the idea that the personal brand is an asset class, and the people that invest in their own personal brand, which sounds so disgusting, and I think you and I both feel like icky about it, but you see what type of impact that can have, and it can still be done in a thoughtful way where it doesn't turn into grifting.
Well, semi-speaking of grifting, the one we haven't talked about, I was thinking about when you were talking, is Elon Musk, right? The whole thing with Tesla, that everybody knows, is that Tesla's never advertised because they didn't need to because they had Elon Musk. But to put a finer point on it, that can lower your CAC and increase your LTV just by having a public presence.
100%. And think about what Elon's been able to accomplish with the capital that he's raised. So I remember sitting behind the Tesla analyst. Again, I was covering industrials at the time. Tesla analyst was behind me, and he had a sell rating on the stock. And he would say, I'm listening to these investors tell me that Elon deserves an Edison multiple. which is this idea of if you could invest in Thomas Edison, then you would have put a massive multiple, because not only is he going to do things that you can believe in, he's going to do things that you have no idea what they're going to achieve. So that's in public markets, but then you go into SpaceX and the private markets, and by just raising that amount of capital, you buy yourself time to figure it out. And what he's been able to do with that is, absolutely insane, with both SpaceX, Starlink, building a true business model around it. But it doesn't happen without the capital. The capital doesn't happen without the ability to be a public presence, to tell the stories. I think we're seeing it in the AI space with what Sam Altman's been able to do. I think we're seeing it in other areas. And, I break down investing into two different things. It's you have your financial performance, your earnings growth, and then you have your multiple. And multiple expansion is the other big piece of financial returns. And I think in public markets, Mobison ran a study, and it was like over the past 20 years, it was 50-50. It was 50% of the S&P 500 return was due to earnings growth. The other 50% was multiple expansion. That's just an interesting thing to note. In private markets, it's happening too. And you just have to be able to understand, am I being sold something real? Is there an execution layer behind this sales job? Or is it, all sale and no surface layer?
I hadn't heard Edison multiple before, so that was a new one to me. So thank you for that. I'm mad I didn't know that one, because that one's fantastic. And I saw what you did inserting breakdown in there, so we'll come back to that. Just Easter egg for everybody. But I think about people bristle at influencer, right? But things change throughout our lives. So we're both old enough now. Like Schopenhauer used to talk about it, for every successful generation you live, like every 20 years, it's like you were selling tickets to the Conjurer show, like selling tickets to the magic show. So you've seen the act happen many times before, so we just see how things change. And from what people bristle against then becomes part of the norm later on. I always use examples, like when I was growing up, like Madonna was so risque, and then it was like Britney Spears, and then whatever the newest pop star is. Like, it's just the same thing in a different form. And at first we don't think we like the word influencer, and then it changes completely. But I think there maybe a good way, and we'll segue into the breakdowns idea, is maybe people are thinking about it in the wrong way, right? They're thinking about maybe some girl on TikTok talking about what they had for lunch, and that's why they bristle at it. But I think about, you run an amazing podcast, Business Breakdowns, and you guys do deep dives into individual equities. But what's interesting about that is you're talking about a company, and usually we'll bring in an expert with that company. But you being the host of that, and even if it's only on audio only, as we both know, audio, and we can get into audio visual, is you're whispering into people's ear holes for an hour every week, right? And whether you sound smart or not, they just get really accustomed to you, and then you become a person of influence because of that parasocial relationship, right?
Yeah, and now with podcasts, with video podcasts, anything that's long form conversation, there is a different level of parasocial relationship that exists. And where the rest of the media landscape move towards shorter, clip-based, you're going to come on CNBC, you're going to get 3 minutes. Well, I don't know what you're really like. You're going to be talking about a very specific thing in a short window, and you're going to try to force it all in there, versus giving someone the time to speak about this stuff, to reveal things about how they view, managing teams and being a leader. And that hits in a way different way in terms of building a level of credibility and trust. And if you go back to the parasocial relationship, it all dates back to the 1950s, 60s. There was a Harvard study about this. And one of the interesting things was they studied a radio personality, and she was effectively, it's very outdated now, but the idea of this, perfect housewife who wanted a man who would come home to her, so that she could cook for him and do all this stuff. And she was saying all of the right stuff that a truck driver at the end of his shift would want to hear. And there was this insane parasocial relationship with her. She never revealed her identity because that was dangerous. But you can just understand that's one form of influence, and it can only happen because you're getting this unique form of interaction with them where you feel like you're really understanding them, versus the rest of media, which I think is increasingly moved towards feeling very manila or very forced and kind of transactional in nature. So that's a pretty big piece of it. But yes, I have felt it, and I know you feel it too. Anytime you put yourself out there, you are now tapping into a wide range of people that otherwise you would have had to meet at an event like this, or by circumstances. And that just wasn't possible before. And by doing things like the podcast or videos or whatever it is, you get invited to things like this to more people. So there's a compounding nature to it. So I can thank you for that, but it is a really interesting dynamic.
But part of that is like, it's interesting, like even though you're trying to run a professional business breakdown podcast, your personality is inevitably going to leak through in places here and there. So if people listen to dozens of episodes, they're going to get to know you pretty well, but then do that parasocial relationship. If you meet somebody at this event and you've never met before, they might know you better than your own family. And I'm just like, is that, how do you have you?
Oh yeah, it's 100%. And I would say with my podcast, it's probably because of the nature of it, which can be kind of rigid. I would say I reveal maybe 50% of what a traditional podcaster might reveal, but it still happens all the time. And the most common thing you hear is, well, I'm used to listening at you at 2x speed. This is a little bit different for me.
So you know I'm doing 3x. That's
yes.
why I'm trying to get you to speed up in real life.
Exactly. And I have to force myself to adjust to that. And but I can remember, being on episodes of things where people would bring up, oh yeah, I heard such and such thing happen, and I'm like, did we talk about that? And they're like, I think we did. And then, oh no, you mentioned it on that podcast, and I just think to myself, wow, I don't know who exactly is listening or how they're listening, but it happens for sure, and it could be a slow compounding build. But I'm continuously amazed at, I have a reasonable size show, but by no means is it, on the, the level of some of the massive ones out there. And just the interactions that I get based on it, which I'm sure you get too, are insane.
But like you also said, what's interesting is like when the long form content, like you said, CNBC 3 minutes versus an hour plus. And it's one thing I've always pushed for is longer form. And right, like Joe Rogan's a perfect example, but if people like him or hate him, but like actually came up in a conversation yesterday here at the collective event in Nantucket. Is like one of the guys was talking about is like he'll actually sometimes fast forward to the final third hour. Like if it's, they're usually 3 hours, he'll skip the first 2 hours and get to the third hour because he's like, that's where the good stuff is that I haven't heard before. Because like a lot of times, like the first 60 minutes, at least somebody's going through their pitch, they're bullshitting you, and you need to like get that out of the system and then really break through that.
We're getting into the dark arts of the podcasting or conversations, but it's 100% true. I mean, I think the first thing when people ask me about tips for podcasting, I'm like, you'll read a lot of stuff out there. To me, the best thing you can do is start out with an excellent first question. Don't ask about background. Don't ask about their career. Ask something super pointed so that the listener is jumping on at 70 miles an hour instead of pacing into it. Now, the reality is most, will work up. You'll loosen up. You don't have rapport like we would have. So it takes some time to break through that. And then at the very end of it, what Joe Rogan's done is just beautiful. It's like after a couple of hours in the same room, people are going to get loopy and a little bit more open, and they might smoke a joint and they might do this, and it just starts to free flow. But those are real things, and like being able to capture those moments, I think most of the world, and I know you had plans to get into AI, but like most of the world is increasingly going to want people off their script. Like it's now we have something that can literally finish our script for us and do it pretty fucking well. Excuse me, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but
go for it. The IRL like is and the long form is much more poignant these days. Like the other day I had a 7-hour conversation here. Like when are you ever gonna have? How are you gonna like through lunch, dinner, and but it felt like an hour and 15 minutes. That's all they're thinking of, like a good road, like that 3 hours, and that's what it condenses like over time. And now you also got me paranoid for what was my first question, which shows I'm a terrible influencer or podcaster because I typically ask 2-3-part questions and people are like, I don't even know where to go. What did you even ask? Is there a question in there?
It's a common thing for many of us podcasters that I fall victim to myself. Yes.
And so don't think I didn't notice that you brought up Goldman, because like anybody that's gone to Harvard, if you also went to Goldman, you will bring it up in the first conversation.
So I've had to force this in. When I worked at Goldman, I would actually tell people that I worked for a bank downtown. And then I left, and then I started podcasting, and introducing yourself to your neighbors as a podcaster is a bit of a difference. And I generally like to be the contrarian, or like I enjoy that kind of being off script or different or not being able to fall into a bucket. But I have learned that it adds credibility, for better or worse. And if you do it in the right way, you don't force it down people's throats, it could be good, but you got to be very careful of it.
You think I'm going to let you get away with? I work for a bank downtown. This is what the Harvard people do when they go, I went to school in Cambridge, because they're waiting for the next question. Which bank? So then it doesn't
One
sound
is
like you do
cliche.
shit. Like,
One is cliche. The other is not, because there are many banks downtown. And if they really wanted to know, they could have kept asking. If it became cliche, like influencer, the term, then I might have moved on from it. But
Well, no, you earned your stripes there. You should use it to leverage everything in the world. I would honestly be wearing Goldman shirts, polos every day if I was you. But like, I brought up Goldman because like every interesting person I know, why we became friends, is like everybody has like these random tangential paths in life, right? And so you're at Goldman and Raven, but then you have this sidestep to running a media empire and everything. And now you're getting back to like the investing side and everything. And I know one of the things you've spent time on that you reference is like AI. But let's maybe start, before we think about like some of the infrastructure plays in AI and maybe some of the investing ideas, is how you think about like AI in general, from like just average usage of AI versus like what's maybe said in the media, or what people are actually using internally at their companies or their employees or bosses, et cetera.
yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And the reality is, it's not black or white. That's the first thing. It's like not, it's going to change the world, or it's a dud. Like, there is a huge middle ground. Where do I side on this? Is that it is a massive new technology layer that individuals can leverage for their own benefit. And that is mostly what's happening today. So where you're seeing most of the usage is just by humans who are embracing different tools themselves. It has nothing to do with what the firm is building or how they're doing it, but they're just getting those annoying tasks done a lot faster. And in the investment community, I think it's particularly interesting because you have the most charismatic CIOs and fund managers out there who talk about AI has transformed my entire investment process. We're not one step ahead of you, we're 50. And then I go and talk to the people on the investment team there, and it's like, no, it sucked and nobody used it. So we all just use off the shelf tools. So I think like you need to be, if you're embracing AI, which I think most people should tap into it 100%, because it's going to make your life easier. Not because you're going to become less of a human, but because there's a lot of annoying things you do all day that could be done a lot faster. And even if it's time savings, time is money and all that stuff. So it's just like using it, finding other people that use it as well, like you, that are doing similar tasks. Forget about the visionaries. Forget about the people trying to market what they're doing. Find other people that are doing things, and you will be amazed when you share one of your use cases, they're going to share those. And that's how I've gotten up the curve just in terms of embracing it. And it's been incredible. Now, where does it go over the future? Like, I think it's going to continue to get better. I have some, fear over what it can actually entail with autonomous agents. And I think there's like a very specific segment of AI, which makes me concerned, because you're giving all these power to the individuals and you don't know what they'll be able to do with it in the future. But I put that aside. That's not for me to worry about.
So speaking of like a specific use case, like maybe if you're getting back in the equity analyst world and everything, like what are the use cases you actually find there, or surprising or delighting you, or where do you find yourself going to?
So, simple things like preparing to have conversations with management teams was something where I would spend, at least an hour reviewing the previous call that I had with the management team, looking through all the results since then. It might be earnings, whatever it might be, forming an outline. And then when I have that call, I'm trying to transcribe everything they say, because it's an hour long and you're not going to remember it. And there's going to be a bunch of answers that are very number based, or it's going to reference, oh, this is going to ramp in second quarter next year. And then afterwards, I have to take that, consolidate it, send it to the rest of my team so they're on the same page. I have something that entire process now is going to take me 20 minutes beforehand, the hour to have the conversation, have a better conversation because I don't have to worry about transcribing anything. And then it's going to give me the best outline, way better than I ever had, immediately after. This, like, Granola is what I use. You can use any type of note-taking app. It can feel so silly, but it has literally been a game changer. And then, oh, by the way, when I want to have that same call 3 months from now, I just put in press releases, earnings updates, and I say, give me a list for this next call. Use, how we talked the last time, bring up anything that's noteworthy. It'll do that, and it could do much more. Like, the compounding from that is nuts. When I put it into like the context of a conference, I would spend an entire Sunday before I flew out to the West Coast to do all these meetings. I could probably do that in an hour now. And like that is material, and there's so many workflows like that exist, which that feels very organizational, but it's freeing up my brain because I want to ask better questions. I want to develop a deeper relationship. So it's actually freeing me up to do more human-like stuff than just, replacing me as a human, which I think is interesting.
Well, speaking of human IRL, I think we just heard the foghorn from there and took a ferry to show this is really being filmed in real life. And these aren't just AI versions.
You're here. We can pump it in if not. Yeah.
But you think it's such it sounds like such a simplistic thing with note taking, but as you and I both know, is like, I really pride myself on like when you're asking good questions and you're trying to elicit nuances of answers, you have to watch like the micro expressions of speech, especially if you're over Zoom or anything. I mean, in real life's better, right? But like to really lock in, you can't ask great questions and take notes at the same time.
I see how hard you're concentrating on this and thinking about the next question, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's like active listening is a difficult thing to develop, and just being able to be in the moment with that is huge. And the other way I would frame it is just like being an investor, monitoring markets is truly never ending. Like literally you could always read something else. What is the famous picture of the investor? It's somebody behind a mahogany desk with a shit ton of papers on there. Those are reports. The reports never get read. They collect us. Well, okay, what's better? Reading the entire thing? Never reading the entire thing? Okay, reading the entire thing. How about reading the entire thing or getting a summary of that thing and then deciding whether you want to read the full thing? I would say, getting a summary of that. Like that's a simple thing too, where you can ingest more information because now you have more time and you can build on it just in terms of the analysis that you could do with it. There's like an infinite amount of things where if I go back to my days at that bank downtown that I worked at, 80% of my time that I spent like in those early years of equity research would be 10% of my time based on what AI tools provided. Now we could decide whether that means that's bad for the labor market, but I think it's just very, very noteworthy.
So one of the things that you're excellent at, and I love your framework for asking questions, and you have a whole systematized process. And we'll see maybe after this if I can sweet talk you enough to put that in the notes here for the collective audience. I guess we'll find out afterwards if I have powers of persuasion or not to get you to share that publicly. That's why I love your framework for asking questions. But before we move on from that, there's one other thing. The typical refrain I get though, immediate knee-jerk reactions to AI is like the hallucinations, and they feel like they have to go back and recheck everything, so maybe they're actually taking more time instead of less time. You and I haven't talked about that, so what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, right now there are tools which give you the source. So like, I think it's very funny if you go outside, like in the investment world, Perplexity. People love Perplexity investment world. Why? Because incorrect information in finance is a death sentence. Like it was like make or break. And once they dealt with hallucinations, a lot of finance people just wrote off AI. Now, you first saw Perplexity, now others have it. But I use vendors where they will answer my questions, give me the exact source with the quotes, and the quotes aren't hallucinated. Like it's very, very strongly locked in. And I think that's where you get into, it's not just training better models, it gets into agentic AI where you can give the specific sources. I don't want you pulling from random Reddit threads. Like I want you pulling from this, or that. Like this is my consumption, and make sure that you give me the exact source. Yes, you're always going to have to do some double checking, but I would say what went from like a 65% hit rate is now north of 95%.
Mm-hmm. Well, part of that, like you're saying, is thinking about the problem and how to address the problem. Because like a lot of times, the other refrain you hear is like people like I put the prompt in and then it didn't come back with what I wanted, and maybe they never worked like an outsourced dev team or a VA or somebody has English as a second language. It's like you have to train yourself on how to prompt. Or
prompt engineering is this
like
funny.
The future, yeah.
I remember like having this aha moment because I just kept hearing it. Prompt engineering. You need to be a prompt engineer. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? It's like giving good directions or asking good questions. And I think about this, like even in the podcasting world, I can remember having this conversation with somebody who was really deep on the Marvel universe. And I said to myself, okay, I want to know, she studied this really hard. Like, what does she think was the most important thing? Was it the IP? Was it the actors, Robert Downey Jr.? Was it Kevin Feige? Was it the technology that advanced just as they were coming out? But if I just asked that, like, of these four things, what was most interesting? The response I was going to get was going to be, well, they're all interested, like they were all really valuable, they were all really important, But by asking that question as, I want you to stack rank these in terms of level of importance, most important to least important. We all agree they were very important, but like, what's your belief in terms of what was most important? And she gave a great response. It was Kevin Feige was her answer. I got what I was looking for. And prompt engineering is different, but it's that same way of like, I need to be better at giving directions. I need to think about this more thoughtfully. And I think that is actually still a pretty big skill. I thought it was a skill that was going to like deteriorate in value as agentic AI got better, but I'm not so sure about that anymore.
So as you trained with the Navy SEALs at this bank downtown, right? And then went into Raven and et cetera, like you get to learn how to deep dive into sectors. And so we're talking generally about AI, but that's one of the sectors you've been looking at recently as you're stepping back into that world. And maybe the infrastructure and power plays behind it. Like what have you been exploring? What's been interesting to you on the AI front?
I have very little conviction. I will answer, I don't know. Maybe that builds trust, hopefully.
Yeah, but except for you're going to go, I don't know, but, and
Well,
then you're going to
I
get
don't know
like,
where the value
yeah,
accrues.
right.
The only thing that I'm convinced of is that humans that embrace the tools early on and get comfortable understanding that they're evolving so fast, such that somebody who just says, I can't rely on AI because of hallucinations, like that is kind of a dated take. And anything that you are convinced of in this moment could be wrong, a week from now. And I would almost think about it as like when you're training a team, I might have brought this example up yesterday. If you find someone who's a junior level employee who's high potential, you usually invest in training them. Like you put effort into it, you understand they're going to make mistakes. What has shown the most potential over the past 2 years besides AI? Like it's gotten that much better. So I think like just approaching it that way, and the humans that are doing that, like I already see it. People are getting their work done faster, they look smarter. And right now they're hiding that a lot of that benefit is coming from AI, which I understand. There's going to be a faux pas if the stodgy management team hears like, oh, well, they're just using AI tools to write those summaries or whatever it is. So I think like the individual layer is the biggest thing. To me, the most obvious thing is like cost savings, which isn't necessarily a good thing. I don't really understand where like the revenue angle is going to come from in a positive some way. I understand like if some software businesses get replaced by new AI startups, like, but that's just, zero sum games. Yeah, my only thing is just like power to the people, individuals, which is kind of like an internet story too. Like humans, individuals gain the most power from the internet.
But like, are you even going upstream? It's like, yeah, I'm sure you're thinking like tangentially of like, okay, they're going to use these tools and everything, but who is maybe the picks and shovels is supplying these
Oh,
tools?
yeah,
Like,
if we're getting into
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Well, I think power is like, if you want to play on AI, power is the thing. And energy, those energy sources, there is insane demand for power to data centers, to everything that's happening right now, and you're seeing it. And you could take different debates on this, but like nuclear is a theme, which is an obvious beneficiary. Data centers is a form of the picks and shovels as well. So those are, to me, like cleaner ways to play it rather than the LLMs, just because I don't know if that's like a winner-take-all market or not. But, and I tend to focus more on public markets. So that's where I definitely think like it's a very clean story to me in terms of the power thesis being the best pure play way to play.
so related to that power thesis, like Doomberg brought up the other day for the group to brainstorm together is like, what if we had infinite free nat gas resources, especially in America or say North America, wherever, like we can go up into the Canada because then you have cooling technologies and the obvious play with like, we can put data centers on there. And one of the complaints about, right, AI is the amount of, compute we need, the amount of energy resources and then the amount of waste it would create and the amount of CapEx spending. So does that, I didn't get your take on it, like what happens if we have infinite and free nat gas? Is that the obvious play for, most obvious for data centers, or you think we still have to spread out our risk across different energy sources, or what's your general take?
Putting aside whether I agree with that thesis or not, if that were to prove correct, gas midstream pipelines would be a massive opportunity because you still need the infrastructure to get the gas from where it is coming out of the well all the way to the end, site and user. And you could put the data centers on top of there, but there's still some infrastructure that's necessary. And then once it's flowing, it's a toll road. Gas pipelines are a toll road. And you have visibility, it's the best base load power. So once it's in place, it's great. And those are historically great businesses, but like many great businesses, when you get levered up and put in complex financial structures, they can, you can get brought down, and then there's a tarnished reputation. But gas pipelines, I mean, like if I could own any asset in the world, there's probably a few gas pipelines, which would be in my top three, and maybe a toll road somewhere.
And if models change, or we can run, micro models on our phone, do you think that changes anything, or you still like that thesis?
In what sense? The thesis on...
I guess you still need a data center, even if you're running it remotely as an overlay on your phone, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think the logistics of, even if natural gas is free, natural gas is not necessarily easy to move. Like, I think...
Transport costs.
Yes, yeah, there's a logistical dynamic to making that move. And that does not yet exist. So you can't put everything necessarily on site in Texas. Yes, there's a lot of land. Even if you did, you would need a lot of gas infrastructure. So there's the Kinder Morgans of the world, and yeah, these large businesses which would be very big beneficiaries from that.
Another thing I know that you're passionate about is like American manufacturing, and more specifically American clothing. And we got very lucky just down the road here from our hotel, actually in our hotel, is Long Wharf Supply that makes sweaters out of recycled oyster shells, etc. And so I was thinking about like in real life versus this abstract podcasting world we live in. One of the things that you and I've kind of talked a little bit about in the past is like having a physical instantiation of what we do combined with this like abstract world, right? And that's part of that marketing and narrative inflection and storytelling. And so like, even if they're selling, 99% of their sweaters online, having that physical location gives them a narrative and storytelling, and having that genus locia being here in Nantucket gives them a different sense of storytelling. And so at the same time, I think about this is what's so great about these events, right? Like, is this in real life setting to give us these conversations that then we can go back to the abstract world for the rest of the year or the rest of the quarter.
Yep.
Is like, and I'm just curious, like, how you're thinking about how does that kind of manifest itself, or whether we're looking at Brad Jacobs or some of that inflection narrative storytelling is like the combining of our digital abstract AI world with actual physical instantiation of your ethos or your narrative storytelling.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you laughed. You bring a bunch of people, that would attend the collective event into a business, and you're gonna have them grilling the founder about how exactly the process works with oyster shells and what role they play in terms of the cotton, which I did appreciate.
Which exact machine are you using
Yeah.
to deconstruct the pellets and to combine? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You're gonna get a rabbit hole grilling.
Yes. Yeah, I think it taps into one of the previous themes which I mentioned with the storytelling, like the physical ability to capture story in a place is beyond our imaginations. And I think we're still in this post-COVID era where we have no idea how to handle interactions where 90% of them are happening online. So like this digital environment, which I admittedly was like 100% I want that. I want to be like async. I don't need to meet in person. Forget about commutes. It's on my time, autonomy. And then you realize some of the shortfalls in terms of lack of natural feedback, lack of body language, and just lack of like the ability to do all the things that get lost in digital communication because it's all just bits, and this captures so much more. So I think what people are starting to understand is like the power of in-person. There was a pent-up demand for events coming out of COVID. Now you have some traditional businesses that are trying to run these, terrible things and missing like the ethos of what makes the most difference, and that's relationships and connection and that ability to sit next to someone for an extended period of time and learn from them, not just on a stage, and I think people are testing out that a lot more. And I think there's probably like a bubble in events that's forming in a certain segment. But what you usually have with bubbles is like those that are doing it the best come out even stronger because, like an Allen and Co., you look at like the mid 90s, like that conference was struggling, and they really had to force people to get there. Now it's like the most iconic thing ever, and you can never imagine a period of time where it was like that. So it's getting through those challenging times. But like to pull it all together, I do think like what's going to be very interesting is with AI, like we're getting all this extra free time, right? In theory, people that use it are going to have more time. What are they going to do with that time? If they're stuck on their phones, very bad. And I think the I hope that the, you know, most ambitious, most thoughtful people in the world take that extra time and use it as a way to connect with their environment more, and tap into that rather than filling it with empty calories. And I think that creates like an opportunity where I'm not of the belief that like everybody goes to a 20-hour work week, but if you just even get slightly more time, that's going to give you the possibility to do more. Does that create more environment for local economies, local things? I think it's possible. I really do.
It makes me think though, because I think about events often or how to do events differently, where I don't like it about events. But you've ever seen teams that have run every size of event, and like so like a multi-thousand person where everybody's just speaking on stage. They all have different value, and then there's some like those 150 people ones that that you've been a part, we've both been a part of, and then a more intimate one right here, like maybe 12, 15, 20 people. Like, how do you think about like what works in those scenarios? Like, do you have like I mean, you haven't thrown that many to get that much feedback, but like I'm curious about what you think works best, like in those scenarios, or like
Yeah, well,
what your preference is.
there's two separate things. There's like the business of events, which the best
Yeah, because you
event-
can't scale these intimate ones, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's more people and advertisers. So you get, let's say 50% of your revenue coming in from advertisers who just want to be in the room, 50% from ticket sales, and as big as we can go. And that can prove to be very valuable. Their name's escaping me. Informa, though. Like, Informa has that. You go to Cannes Lion out in France, and it's nuts. It's like, this is an event. There's yachts and whatever, and they've mastered the idea of these massive, massive events. And then there's, what you were describing and the guest experience. And if you're trying to maximize the guest experience, it's a tricky thing, but I think what people are most interested in is insights and relationships. And what happened over time was like, people increasingly felt like the stage was not giving me insights. I was getting script and, corporate speak, and you need really good interviews up there. Like, I actually think journalists tend to do the best job in those type of conference events because they'll actually ask hard questions. They need to be respected, but you'll get information out. But that's a specific type. So it's put even more focus on like the relationships. And I think it's interesting, like when I do go to these large events, there's nobody sitting inside, where the main stage is. Everybody's outside in the atrium having conversations. So, what I've seen some like interesting tactics to doing it is, same thing that Shannon does with like finding people, and you were doing as well, I should give you credit, that you would have a connection to or that you might learn from. Finding easy ways to pair you together to have one-off conversations, and helping to facilitate that. Because like where I've failed is I'm like, you guys all have connections. You should go meet each other. But I don't do any help in facilitating it. Yeah, and then that's where you get branched out. So you can do that very intentionally. I've seen conferences where you're like forced together based on matchmaking and it feels like speed dating. Or, in more thoughtful ways and like comfortable ways.
I'm surprised that you said you don't think about the facilitation, because I think you're so good at that kind of stuff. But then it made me realize, like I learned the other night, that every night, your family sits down to a black tie dinner. So like you like to throw great dinner parties. But that's the thing is, like,
wish.
if you had these intimate ones, right, like we have here, like do you have any hacks or thoughts about like how do you curate that? Because like if it is that intimate, one person can throw off the vibe and dynamic of that, and it's almost impossible to figure out. And you want disparate people with intensely different backgrounds, but come together in a collective way, right? But it's like, do you have any hacks or tips for that, or you don't, because you're not even thinking about facilitating?
No, I do think about it. I mean, it's the same thing as portfolio construction, and in portfolio construction, like the wild card is leverage. Like if you add leverage, which is kind of the grenade in the intimate setting, it takes down everything. It can totally destroy something. Now you might be able to hedge that leverage with somebody who's very good at distilling things. But it's like a curation, which is one of those like, oh, qualitative. How do you measure like the ability to curate people? Some people are good at it though. Like some people are it's hard to describe in scientific terms. But I think some people, they will connect me with others, and I'm like, man, you have like a 90% hit rate in terms of people that I like. And that I think is unique, and it's just being aware. Now, it's Metcalfe's law, like the complexity of adding more relationships, you know, has an exponential impact on things. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, when it's just you and me talking here, we don't need to tell her, but Shannon's obviously very good at it as well.
Very, yeah.
But there was one point that I had to circle back to. It's like you talked about you when we went full digital, you were all for it and living this, async life and everything. But I know a lot of times you'll work out of a cabin in your backyard. But this is just a personal question from me, is when you're working the cabin in the backyard, are we talking PJs? Or are you like my father-in-law where you get dressed up in your suit like you're going to work because it's business mode and you have to get into that mindset?
I don't wear sweats. That's not happening. I will. Yes, I'm not suit and tie.
Even some shishiko sweats? Like, are we?
No, those come off. I'm
Okay.
like, you need to be in the mental mind to be doing the task that you're doing. I wouldn't show up to play basketball in a tuxedo, even if it was made of the best, flexible, elastic wear. And when I go out there, yeah, it's like, you gotta act as if. Do I have a t-shirt on from time to time? Yeah, but it's when I'm in a tech mood, It's like I'm out on the West Coast.
Do I have a t-shirt I'm trying to remind me, like, have you seen the F1 movie yet with Brad Pitt?
I have yet to see it.
All right, so he's like, kind of down and out driver, right? And he's in this like laundromat doing his laundry, and he's sitting there in like a t-shirt and jeans, and in walks Javier Bardem in like a three-piece suit, and he's like joking with him about wearing a suit. Meanwhile, he's wearing God's True cashmere t-shirt. That's $900 for the t-shirt. It's like just the magic of movie making in the bullshit.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, for those that know, that doesn't quite land as well, but yeah.
Speaking of aesthetics, I just want to thank the Faraway Hotel. This has been, I mean, because it's our aesthetics, so we're just big upping ourselves, general. And thank, Shannon from the collective and putting on these wonderful events. More importantly, it's great to spend time with you and be able to sit down and do it in front of, I guess we're pretending there's not cameras here, or like...
Cameras and great camera folks. No, this is great. It's been incredible. I do think the setting for events really matters. And walking into this type of place where there's nature, it's quaint in the right way, but it's tasteful in every little detail. Those types of things have more and more impact now because of the dominance of slop in terms of what we see. So when you feel like thought out, someone's hand was in this, like, it has way more of an impact, I think, than most people would expect. That's why, like, dressing well is also, it has that same type of, you don't know how people are going to react. They can't even explain it to you, but it does have an impact. And then you pair that with the group of very interesting people who have very interesting perspectives and are willing to disagree on things. That's like nirvana for me.
Yeah, I just want to thank you as Matt Quaint and Tasteful Russell.
It's what I'm going for. So I'll add that to the bio.